In this video, we're going to visit some ghost towns in southern Alberta. You're going to see abandoned grain elevators, churches, stores, hotels, and more. So let's begin. The first town we're going to visit is Esther, Alberta. There's still a couple of families who live here, and they own almost all of the property in this town. There's the old gas station. They still have the old gas pump out in front too. And there's his old pickup truck. We're right off Main Street here. I don't think any of these businesses have been in operation since about the 70s. I'm not sure what this was, but I'm pretty sure it was farm related. The one building that draws a lot of people's attention is the old grain elevator. These train tracks have been gone for decades, and someone even posted a sign with all the grain elevator agents right on the door. This used to be the church or a community hall. There is a paved road to get into town, so you should have no trouble getting here. But because it is private property, please don't enter any of the buildings. The next town is Bindloss, Alberta. The first time I visited here in 2005, I almost stepped on a rattlesnake a few kilometers outside of town. Not much has changed here in the last 18 years. I think this building used to be an auto repair service. This small building at the corner of Main Street and Railroad Avenue was probably an insurance office or a hair salon, and it still has wooden sidewalks. And here's a gas station that probably hasn't been used in at least 50 years. And this gas station's completely gone, except for the lamps. The school closed down in the mid-90s. That's also when they tore up the train tracks and tore down the grain elevators. Once that happened, this town probably went downhill pretty fast. Here's the site of the original school. And here's a church that doesn't look like it's very old, but I'm pretty sure it's abandoned. And they built this memorial for the church and to a lady named Evelyn de Morist. The next town is Empress, Alberta. It's not really a ghost town because there's still a lot of people who live here, but it's pretty close, and it's right on the Saskatchewan border. The most famous building here, of course, is the old train station that they've restored. It hasn't been in operation since the early 70s. The train tracks were gone in about the mid-90s, and you can still see the old railroad bed. I think this building here was a railroad building. And this town has an abandoned hospital, and it's not even that old. It looks like they recently installed some security cameras. People must have been sneaking inside. On Main Street, here's the old bank building. This town is actually really nice. I would live here. They've still got a grocery store and a library. In about 2006, this was a motel and a restaurant. I'm pretty sure of it. I tried to stay here and get some food, but they had already closed. Now it's not in operation anymore. On Main Street, there's a couple of other buildings like this old church. And here's the old school. It's been closed down since the 90s. Homes are very affordable here. It seems to draw an awful lot of people who are in the arts community. You're only about an hour and a half away from Medicine Hat. It would be a great place to live if you can work online or work from home. I think this church is now being used as a studio. At the community hall, there's a map of all the attractions in the area. In downtown, they do have an art studio and they also sell ice cream. Just across the border into Saskatchewan, the Red Deer River and the South Saskatchewan River meet up. It's filled with wildlife. We are pretty close to the Great Sandhills. It's a really pretty area to visit. The next town is Rowley, Alberta. I've been coming here for 20 years. Nothing really changes. They filmed a few movies here, so they have kept place up. And they got this perfectly restored old train station, even though the train stopped coming here 25 years ago. They've also restored the grain elevators. And right in front of them is this old farm equipment. I think these were combines, but I could be wrong. About a decade or so ago, they repainted these Alberta wheat pool elevators in the classic style. And walking right down Main Street, you're going to see a lot of relics from the past. During summer, every month, they have a great big pizza party. So if you Google the word Rowley Pizza Party, you can learn more about it. But I guess it's a great big deal. And in this old bank building, someone's staring out the window. But this is the most famous building of them all, Sam's, named after the guy who ran the place. And this operated until about the 80s. It was a cafe and store, but I guess they also did a little bit of gambling in the back. The next stop is Dorothy, Alberta. It's in the Badlands, right near Drumheller. 20 years ago, this place was deserted, and the buildings were in bad shape. But they have restored both of the churches, and a couple of families have moved in. And what makes it even more exciting is that you can go inside the churches and see it for yourself. There's a guest book, so make sure to sign in. This church closed in, I think, 1961. And this church closed about the same time. They've also filmed a couple movies here too. And if you watch Tom Cochran's video, Life is a Highway, you're going to see this town in that video. What an absolutely amazing job they've done restoring this place. It was completely rotted 20 years ago. This is the old store. It closed down in 1979. The road behind this building is a private driveway to someone's residence, so please don't go past that phone booth in the background. And when you do see the phone booth, look inside. There's a surprise. Where the highway is now used to be the railroad tracks. The railroad was torn up, I think, in the 60s. And then they converted it into a highway. In all those years, that grain elevator still stands, although it is in bad shape, and you're probably going to see it being torn down at some point. Just down the road is the Atlas coal mine. This is only open in summer months, but you can still see it right off the main road. This place is an authentic mine experience. They've pretty much saved everything. It hasn't been used in a few decades, and there is an admission fee if you want to check it out. They do have a website, atlascoalmine.ca, if I'm not mistaken. I spent about 2 hours here to see everything. They even do tours of the mine. It's an absolutely fun place to explore, and if you're in the Drumheller area, you should come and visit this place. And just down the road is the old railroad bridge. This thing is breathtaking. They have fenced it off so you can't cross it anymore, but you can get pretty close to it. And you can even see the old railroad tracks. Next up is Sharples, Alberta. Nobody lives here anymore. The train tracks were torn up in the mid-90s, but they still have this old grain elevator here. And it's still in the Badlands near Drumheller. Somehow this old barn has survived the years. The abandoned buildings across the street are on private property, and the sign says no trespassing. I think it's only one of a couple original P&H grain elevators left in the prairies. Next up is Retlaw, Alberta. Like most ghost towns in southern Alberta, once the grain elevators closed down or the train service stopped, people moved away. When you combine that with the Great Depression and the fact they build more modern highways, a lot of these small towns on grid roads were doomed. The people who've lived here have taken the time to put a little bit of history on all these signs on some of the buildings. This community hall was only abandoned in 2013. This is where the old Retlaw Hotel used to be. And they've even posted pictures of some of the old buildings on the signs. I think this was an old well. And I'm not sure why there's an outhouse right on Main Street, but I guess that's the way it used to be. And this building is the jackpot. They allow you to peep inside the windows because they've restored the inside. You can't go in there anymore, but peek through the windows and you're going to see what life was like decades ago. It's like time travel. I came here 20 years ago, and everything looks the same now as it did then. There's still a couple families who live here, but otherwise this town has been abandoned for decades. I believe the train tracks were torn up in the year 2003, but the grain elevators haven't been in operation since the 70s. And the old church is now in use again. 20 years ago, it was in bad shape, but someone now takes care of it and has restored it. In fact, while I was in town, somebody was inside caring for the building. The next town is Skiff, Alberta. This town still has train service, but I only think the train comes once a month. And I don't even know if this grain elevator is still in use anymore, but I think someone still used the building for something. There's not much left of Skiff anymore, but I was really fascinated by this old railroad vehicle. I'm not sure if it was powered by gas or if you had to use pedals. And here's the old hotel, bar, and store. At least that's what I think it used to be. There's still a handful of families who live here, but that was pretty much what's left of the town. The next town is Nemiskam. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong. Not much is here anymore except for this old gas station and store. It's kind of unusual to see a stone gas station, but that's probably why it survived the test of time. And right next door to it is this brick building, which was probably also a store of some sort. Even though the town still has train tracks, I don't think the train passes through here anymore. Maybe once in a while. And this is the funniest sign in all of Alberta. The future home of Kmart. That sign has been there for more than 20 years. But otherwise, a walk up Main Street is pretty much empty except for a couple more residences. The next town is Etzikom, Alberta. And if I mispronounce that, will you let me know in the description below? Sorry about that. The train stopped coming here in about 1996. Main Street has a few abandoned buildings, including this wonderful church. Last service was in 2001. This was the old gas station. But the most exciting thing in town is the old windmill museum. This place is fascinating. I can't believe it's here in the middle of nowhere, Alberta. They have dozens of these old windmills. I didn't realize how big these things were. And they also have a restored gas station at the museum. You can come check it out yourself, and there's a church beside there too. These old gas pumps are amazing. And the next town is Orion, Alberta. It uses the same train track that stopped running in 1996. That's also about when they tore down the grain elevators. Right on Main Street, there's this old store. A lot of the buildings are gone now. If you walk down the sidewalk on Main Street, it's pretty much empty. This is where the famous store used to be. Anybody who's explored this town in the last 20 years came to Stephen's Hardware and Garage. But it burnt down a few years ago. This was an old church or community center. The old school is amazing, and from what I understand, it is now used by the local church. There's a couple houses in the residential area. My favorite one is this house with a gate in front. It looks kind of spooky. And the best no trespassing sign I've ever seen in my life. Beware of rattlesnakes, skunks, raccoons, and neighbors. Nobody wants to go here because of skunks. There's a few more houses, but from this point forward is private property and the signs say no trespassing. The next place is the Hart Creek Bunker. This was a bunker built in the 60s before it was abandoned. I guess they sort of figured it was leaking too much water. It does require a 2-kilometer hike from the Hart Creek Trail. I'll put a link to it and the GPS in the description below. It's probably only about 4/10 of a kilometer of hiking in here. And it's pitch dark, so make sure you bring a bright flashlight. But once you get inside, there's all these different rooms. And it's much cooler in here than it is outside. Because it's so dark, I don't think you're ever going to find any animals in here. It sure would be kind of spooky to encounter any kind of large mammal right now. Unfortunately, a lot of people have come in here to do graffiti. This is right across the highway from Exshaw, Alberta, kind of close to Canmore. You can actually see the traffic from Highway 1 from the entrance of the cave. And finally, there's Bankhead, Alberta. This is now part of Banff National Park, so they have a parking lot so you can come visit. There's Lower Bankhead and Upper Bankhead. In Lower Bankhead, you're going to see a lot of the abandoned buildings that they use as part of the mine. Upper Bankhead was mostly residential. It's also closed in winter. They don't maintain the highway all year. And this is one place where you might encounter bears. It's also kind of dangerous when you're walking around in the forest, so be very careful here. They do have a lot of plaques and information to explain the history of the place. It was abandoned in the 20s because they kicked them out because this was now a national park. And they have this old train just sitting there in the middle of town. Between Lower and Upper Bankhead is the foundation for the old church. This is my favorite part. To visit this place, you will have to pay the Banff entrance fee. I'm not sure what it costs anymore, but the price has gone up quite a lot in the past 10 years. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section below.